ranch structure and characteristics. To get an accurate portrayal of the Californios' wealth and power during the Mexican period, we need to understand the ranch structure and characteristics. Roughly 8 million acres were controlled by 800 individuals. This was 10% of the non-Indian population. Because the Mexican government, in efforts to prevent concentrated power to encourage the distribution of land, set limits of ranch grants to 50,000 acres or 76 square miles. These elite families would put multiple grants under different family members, thus increasing their land base and wealth. Because these parcels of land were so vast and concentrated in the hands of a few, a detailed system of property ownership did not develop. These land grants were leisurely surveyed and measured many times, marked by stones, a river, a group of cactuses, and other natural indications. Further, detailed paperwork was mostly obsolete, and transactions by inheritance or business were honored by a simple handshake and a man's honor. As with the missions during the Spanish era, these ranch estates became the central economic institutions in California. Unlike the missions that were self-sufficient with large farms, agricultural fields, and workyards producing the goods necessary for a society, the ranch estates under the Californios concentrated on cattle ranching. Hides were dried out in the sun and fat rendered into tallows by melting in kettles. They traded their leather and leatherworks mostly with New England merchants in exchange for all of their necessities. Californios were then entirely dependent on imports. There was no industry and everything had to be imported. The skills to manufacture goods at the mission disappeared after secularization. They traded their leatherworks for cloth, silk, lace, and other luxury goods. It was a life of opulence. The Californios' diet consisted of some agricultural products, but mainly of fresh or dried beef. What happened to the Mission Indians during the Mexican period? Many returned to their tribes. However, the landscape had changed profoundly. The horses, mules, sheep, pigs, and goats introduced by the Spanish into the California biosphere ravaged the delicate native grasses and aspects of the natural environment, devastating the social fabric of Indian life. Others migrated and joined tribes in the interior of California, mostly in the Sierra Mountains. The majority, however, became landless peasants or laborers on the ranch estates and surrounding pueblos. They continued to live in a semi-feudal relationship where the landowner provided their food, clothing, in exchange for free labor. Once bound to the missions, they were now bound to the ranches in a cycle of debt peonage. The mestizos, what many California historians call a third racial class, will emerge during the Mexican era in California. These are poor Mexicans from the south who migrated to California in search of small land. Similar to the Californios' relationship with their Indian population, they will look down upon the mestizos as being inferiors, referring to them as cholos or scoundrels. Some mestizos will eventually purchase small plots of land, but the majority worked alongside California Indians on the large ranch estates. Daily life on these ranches. While the California Indians and poor migrant Mexicans provided labor and suffered in poverty, the Californial elite enjoyed a leisurely lifestyle. The daily life for the Californios is characterized as a life of opulence in continuous pursuit of pleasure. They often displayed their wealth by sharing it with others. They entertained guests with the fandango, the bomba, 3-day wedding celebrations, fiestas celebrating different Catholic saints, and rodeos, where men would display their horsemanship, gamble, engage in cockfighting, and sometimes bull and bear baiting. Entertaining guests with ostentatious celebrations and fiestas was socially important. It was an opportunity to display wealth and status to their Indian laborers and common folk, and even amongst themselves. The California Indian is also referred to as the quote unquote other. Racial identity continued to determine social status and access to resources, principally land, and during the Mexican era, this becomes more complicated. While Californians viewed California Indians as a source of labor, they also served another important societal function. Californios saw the California Indian as the other, their social opposite, meaning the Californio saw his Indian as dark-skinned and dirty, lazy, wild, in need of parenting, a heathen, poor, and uncivilized, unable to become quote unquote gente de razón, or people with reason. And because the continuous presence of the California Indian, the California then always had a reminder of himself as being the social superior. The Californio saw himself as being white, as being wealthy, a landowner, civilized, Christian, and gente de razón, or a person with reason. It was an us versus them mentality where race justified power and domination. This sense of entitlement and superiority based on racial, or the idea of racial purity, was in fact socially constructed and had no biological base to it. The fact is that most California elites were mestizo, meaning that due to generations of sexual relations between Spaniards and California Indians, Californios also had Indian blood in them. Many were even dark-skinned with Indian features. Even though most Californios had a dubious lineage, they were very conscious of social status and needed a way to justify the accumulation of land and wealth. Thus, in social circles, most Californios publicly denied their Indian blood and highlighted their Spanish lineage. It was a caste system then, where the caste actually determined your race. Land ownership and social status determined your race. Despite your racial lineage, if you owned huge tracts of land and people referred to you as a Don or Don Francisco or Don Jesus, and you rode a horse with your Indian servant running on foot beside you, then you were sure to be of pure Spanish stock. Or so it appeared.